Billy Ray T.C. Thompson, Pinky, Randy Pruitt, John Davis, Johnny Weaver, Dong Laundry, Norman Hall, Dog, Sugarman,
Wicked, Candy, Joker, Rico, Draper, Stanley Young, Dirty Diana,
Catherine Wheeler, Armando, Mike, Jim Bishop, Timothy Laprie, Al Alford, Ed, Bonehead,
Keith Lester, Carol McKinley, Mother Lala, Easy E, Rock Hudson, Darnell, Ray Ray, Too Tall South Park, and our loved ones,
Ralph Ascoli, Wayne Saves, Martin Stokes,
Jim Thomas, Ben Gauker, Matthew Daly,
Auntie Ely, V. Vasquez, Dominic, Bruce, Lee, Edwin, Buddy, Kenny, Edward, Daryl, Scott, Antonio, Anthony, Alberto, Jeffrey, John Cole, Etta James, Gustavo, Jaime, Renee, Edward, Peter, Timmy, Kenneth, Jesus, Orville, Keith, Aquili, Norman, John, California prisoner number E86630, David Toomey, Mark Cripps, David Erickson, Speedy, Adam, Giorgio Negrin, Bob Phillips, Jim Murnane, Kevin Vanderheed, Larry Newland, Arthur Evans, and my own precious son, Louis Bongiorni.
Scott, Dennis Huma, Alex Wong, Noel Bryant, PhD, Ken S., Ron D., Robert Sellers, Jim Silva, Steve Banghart, Jack Veba, Sharon, Ed Ulrich Sagai, Wallace, Joseph Lewis, Mark Curry, Valente V., Louis Miller, Jesse Solis, Howard Thomas, Patrick A. Hard, Joni Roberts, Steve Dewberry, John, Ross, Scott Clinton Derry, Ben Goldstein, Edward D. McCormick, Robert Wayne Ball, Charles W. Thomas, Joseph Edward Joe Nobles, Jody L. Keister, Trevor Warren Hill, my friends JJ and Boogie, and my grandfather, William Croft Sr.
Dan Covey, Steve Funderburk, Peter Brian Bromelo, Barry Leon, Michael Uhas, Bill Delegan, David Greens, Greg Drotar, Glenn Nutgrass, Bob Dominguez, Michael Getz, MD, Brian Weddle, Carlos Montero, Rick Rourke, Michael Langdon, Mark Miller, Steve Oster, Bob Bowser, Paul Sem, Michael Hardwick, Robert Edward Tajian, Michael Wiles, John, Elizabeth Glaser, Dominic Aiea, Jimmy D. Carter, Tom Cooper, Jeffrey Kozman, Warren Hogan, Dana Powell, Sonny Nolte, Larry L. Harris, Jr.
Sandy, John, Tommy Sawyer, Chuck, Dell, San Fran Boy 78, Scott, Mike, Vicky Tran, Johnny, Chet Porter, Bob Caliono, Clayton, Alan Schlielpen, Michael J., Annette Patterson, Mary Fisher, Vinny, and my dear friend, beautiful friend, Jennifer Ferdman.
Danny, Michael Hostins, Bill Fitzpatrick, Melissa Hill, Mark Carr, Pam, Michael P., Chili, Trevor H., Bud Rogers, Bobby Loveday, Kevin Lee, Beth Fears, Joel, my dear friends, Jim Atwood, Scott Drew, Alan Hayworth, and Kelly Glenn Powell.
Doug Rumors Piercy, Ronald Montgomery, Solo Freddie Frio, Todd Henry, Eric Sharon, Andrew, Bruce Bulifant, David Langston, Charles R. North, Nee Moody, Stephen G. Maroon, Michael Clark Karstens, Edward Stulif, Lowell, Wal Moore, Brian Keith Mexicot, Larry Page Lyle, James Gerald Fritz, Joe Foster, Steve Nash, Louis Catalano, Eric Wesley Sodergen, Harry San Farley, Dale Van Sickley, J. Jason Sweeney, William Bill Cruz, Barry Edward Fox, Tim Nolan, Brett Lee Hall, Michael T. Elise, my friends and co-workers, Roger Z., David Hamilton, Stephen E. Lynch, and Ronald Dice.
Robert J. Mashburn, Rick Smith, Benny, Raymond Wood, Timothy J. Lynham, Kevin Schieffer and Robert Mashburn, John C. Suzuki, Ronnie Dobson, Michael Ray Stoner, Robert Louis Wizenot, William Jr. Myers, George Arthur Sales, Kenneth B., Frank R., Alan Peralt, Mike Fines, Joseph Gerard Mellett, Ricky M.R.J., Tom McDaniel, Alfred B., Mike A., Anthony J., and my good friends, Father Robert Arpin and Father Jeremiah Burmeister.
My son and good friend, Gary Ebert.
Keia Correa, Russell Dean Kuhn, George A. Renfield, Renan R., Louis, Ronaldo, Tommy, Charlie, Carl, Ed, Davy, TJ, Charlie, Timothy Stinnett, Larry Jenkins, Kenneth Richard Walker,
Stuart John Griffin, Robert Nance, Michael Clark, James Donahue, Kayla Royps, Little Eddie Coombs, Sam, Jack, Myra, Luis, and in my own life and the lives of those I love, Rusty Mulligan, Dr. Thomas M. Bennett, Dr. David M. Powell, Dr. Warren Chamberlain, Stephen Craig Toutfest, George M. Correa, and my partner of 15 years, William Keith Marshall Simpson.
Michael J. Rubino, Ed, Tim Haley, Greg Johnston, Terry, Jim Schaefer, David E. Flanagan, Daniel F. Brewer, Jim Mouse, Glenn Heath Hill, Lynn Douglas Lott, Brian Talbot, Don Wilson, Tony D. Green, Billy Michael Brown, Brett Edward Schroeder, Bill Bennett, Jeffrey Allen Webb, Wayne, Rob Brooks, Lowell Thomas Ward, Tom McBride, Larry Perry, Donald Torrance, Tom Hickam, Jim Lyons, and Ryan White.
Dr. Robert Corns, Stephen Kalalea, John Botker, David Wiles, Mario Gutierrez, Greg, Richard Hisayo, Brad Scarquia, David Price, Dean, Dave,
Claiborne Jones, Alan Butler, my Kentucky cousin, Dirk, Tim, Charles, Linda High, Gary LeGrand, Sherry Tate, Bill Samuel,
Jerry L. White, Mark Brown, Drost, Stephen, Stewart, Vivgior, Jeffrey A. Simpson, Eric Tolley, Terry, Don, Mike, my friends Micah, Larry Hunter, David Lesser, and Rhapsody.
Dick Roberts, Forrest Christie, Frank Pilello, Fred Steinke, Jackson Parks, Jeff Almore, Jeffrey Heineman, Jerry Hobbs, Jim Anderson, Jim Broderick, John Haydu, Kent Story, Larry McLaughlin, Lloyd Beersley, Mark McClure, Michael Cook,
Allen, Sherman, Pond, David, Darren, Stewart, William, Liz, Leonard, Arnold, Gil, Joseph, Wayne, Bobby, Mary, Dewey,
Max Robinson, Jack Castor, Richard Rector, William Bear Henderson, Dennis Lusk, Jerome Caha, Rolf and Pele, Keith Gunn, Bob Higgins, Bruce Bayer, Roger, Jim Smith,
Gary Reeves, Jerry Strickland, Bill Foster, Butch Sheffield, Michael Toth, Danny Larson, Kelvin Jenkins, Jack Marvin, Steve Ward, Wally Barrow,
Chuck Lale, Michael Lee McGuire, Keith Saunders, Richard Allen Bolt, Paul Lederer, Ed Carraro, Kent J. Steffens, Lynn Alton Bugby, David Lemos, Darrell, John Hirsch, Barney Wood, James Otis Redmond, Dana Andrews, Ted Daniel Enlow, Paul Werner, Andrew D. Nelson, Gary Lee Kaiser, Nan Marie Lenhart, Tracy McBroom, John P. Murphy, Wayne Drake, Arthur E. Bellamore, Stephen Whitney, David Thompson, Larry Clausen, Michael R. Palmer, L. Dale Inman, Brian Eugene Granger, John Huard, Oren Lynn Klein, Antonio Perez, John Kaufman, and my dear friends, Ronald Wright, Leland Williams, Jimmy Whiting, Teresa Quintana, Darren Grant, Steve Harkins, Gregory Dunn, Lawana Jordan, Marianne Storetta, and Stacy Sassy King.
Ivan, Rich A., Albert, Larry, Unknown, Douglas, John, Jackson, Phil, Rocco, Bruce, Russell, Doug, Charlie, Paul, and Patrick, and for my dear brother, George Sherman James IV, my own buddy, Wayne C. Klein, and three dear Damien board members, Jeffrey Barron, James Lyons, and Ed Wetzel.
Mike M., Donna, Matt, Mark, Dwayne, Andre, Kenneth, Dan, Gregory, Jonathan, Carol, Alicia, Raymond, Mike, Lisa, Winifred. And for my brother Alan in California, Roger Miller, Glenn Cold, Brad Davis, Danny Ward, Jay Gardner Green.
Keith Bishop, Eddie Smith, Trey Durham, Patrick Collins, Jeff Brown, Mark, Jay, Jim, Glenn Reese, Paul, Mark Schroeder, Lloyd, Paul, Michael J. Gray, Charles Wesley Mitchell, Jr., Daniel Scott Strano, Mitchell Ramos, my nephew's beloved uncle, David Whitlatch, my dear friends, loved ones, Peter Babcock, Terry Buheller, and my childhood friend, Mary Beth, the girl next door.
Eric Allen, Larry Ellis, Jay Shelton, Ulysses Dove, Trey Johnson, Robert Willingham, Malcolm Watlington, Jeremy, Kalu, Jimmy, Garth, Gregory, Joseph Walker, Marvin Young, Kenny, William Washington, Baron Thurman, Aaron Thomas, Alan Singleton, Matthew, and Arnie Lewis.